Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are jumping right into, well, maybe the biggest question in all of human history.
It really is. We're asking, why did human societies on different continents end up on such, radically different paths?
Yeah, and to do that, we're going to center this entire deep dive around a single, really powerful question. It was asked back in 1972 by a New Guinean politician. His name was Yali.
And Yali's question, it just cuts right through everything. He basically looked at the Western researchers and asked, why is it that you white people developed so much cargo?
And by cargo, he meant everything, right? Steel axes, matches, medicine.
Exactly. All of it. And we black people had so little of our own.
That's our mission today, to find the ultimate explanation for that disparity. And to be really clear, we're not looking for answers based on, supposed inherent differences between people. History shows that's just not true.
Right, we have to push the chain of causation back, way back.
It's like that history is an onion idea. You can't just look at the surface. You have to peel back layer after layer to get to the core.
So we'll start with the collision itself, the immediate, the proximate factors, and then we're going to peel it all back, like 13,000 years, to find out what environmental factors set the stage.
And that ultimate collision, the moment that just makes this whole disparity terrifyingly clear, is the encounter at Cajamarca.
Peru, 1532. You have the Spanish conquistador Francisco Pizarro leading this tiny force, just 168 soldiers.
And he's about to meet the Inca emperor, Atahualpa, who's backed by a massive army, maybe 80,000 men.
Yeah, on paper, it's not even a fight, it's a slaughter. And it was.
But not the way you'd think. Pizarro won. He killed thousands of Inca soldiers and famously lost 0 of his own men.
And that unbelievable, just totally one-sided victory, it really boils down to 4 key advantages, 4 pieces of superior cargo that the Europeans had.
Okay, so the first 2 are probably the most obvious ones, right? You've got steel and you've got horses.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Pizarro's men had steel swords, steel armor, some early firearms. Atahualpa's army, they were fighting with clubs made of stone, bronze, or wood. Their armor was quilted.
The technological gap is just immense.
And then the horses. You have to understand, horses were basically the jeeps and Sherman tanks of ancient warfare in Eurasia.
They gave you speed, height, and I imagine just pure psychological shock.
Total shock against troops who had never seen an animal used in battle. And it's so telling, the sources point out that the only Native American groups who held out for centuries against European expansion.
Let me guess. The ones who got horses and guns.
The ones who got horses and guns. The Plains Indians. They leveled the playing field because they got the other side's cargo.
Okay, so steel and horses, clear advantage. What's the third one?
The third one is, it's a bit more subtle, but deceptively powerful. It was literacy.
Literacy. Wait, hold on. How does being able to read and write give you a tactical edge over an army of 80,000? That feels a little abstract.
Because literacy meant the Spaniards were the heirs to a huge recorded history. They had thousands of years of military strategy, records of other conquests, stories of traps and tricks. They knew how empires fell.
So Pizarro could literally read a playbook. He knew about Caesar, about Alexander the Great, about how to take down a big centralized state.
Exactly. Meanwhile, what did Atahualpa have? He had a few word-of-mouth reports from a single scout who'd spent maybe 2 days with the Spaniards. He had no historical concept for this kind of threat.
He just walked right into the trap.
He walked into a trap that Pizarro was running from a script that was thousands of years old. Literacy gave them that deep well of human experience to draw from.
But even that isn't the biggest factor, is it? The thing that really paved the way, maybe years before Pizarro even got there, was invisible.
Germs.
Yeah.
This is the lethal gift of livestock. We're talking about diseases like smallpox, measles, influenza. They all originally came from pathogens that infected domestic animals in Eurasia.
So Eurasians had been living with these animals for millennia, building up immunities.
Right. They had inherited and acquired resistance, but for the people in the Americas, there was 0 prior exposure. So a disease that was just a childhood illness in Europe became
A biological apocalypse. The sources say that smallpox sometimes wiped out up to 99% of the population in some areas. Pizarro was often conquering a ghost town.
He was conquering a society that was already in a state of collapse from plague. That biological weapon is maybe the single most important proximate factor.
Okay, so we have the what? Guns, germs, steel, literacy. Now we peel the onion back. Why? Why did Eurasians have all that stuff and not the peoples of the Americas or Africa?
And the ultimate answer, the core of the onion, is the rise of food production, agriculture, and animal domestication.
This is the engine that drives everything else.
It's the absolute engine, because food production means you can create a food surplus. And once you have a surplus, you can support people who don't farm.
The specialist.
The specialists,
Yeah.
professional soldiers, metal workers, priests, scribes, kings, the people who actually invent and build and organize the cargo.
So it all comes down to who got a head start in farming.
It does, and what's really fascinating is Eurasia's incredible head start, specifically in a place we call the Fertile Crescent. This is back around 8500 BC.
Modern-day Iraq, Iran, that area, what was so special about it? What made it so lucky?
It just happened to have this perfect starter pack of wild plants, the founder crops.
Which were?
Wild wheat, barley, peas, lentils. These things were already, high yield in the wild. They were easy to grow, easy to store, and crucially, they didn't need much genetic change to become super productive crops.
Yeah, okay, now let's contrast that with the Americas. What were they working with?
The main candidate in the Americas was a wild grass called teosinte.
Which looks nothing like the kern we eat today.
Nothing at all. It took several thousand years of really painstaking, difficult, selective breeding to turn that tiny grass into what we know as maize or corn.
So there's a huge time lag built in from the very beginning.
A massive time lag. One continent is off to the races with agriculture, the other is stuck in slow motion just trying to develop a decent food source. That time difference just echoes through all of history.
But as you said, plants are only half the story. The other part is the animals.
The domestic mammal gap. And you could argue this is even more important, because large domestic animals give you everything. Meat, milk, fertilizer, wool.
The ability to pull a plow, which revolutionizes farming, land transport,
The horse. And, of course, the germs.
and these animals, these domesticable large animals, are unbelievably rare.
They're so rare. Before the 20th century, humans only managed to domesticate 14 species of large, plant-eating land mammals. Total. Worldwide.
And Eurasia had, how many of them?
Eurasia had 13 of the 14.
13 out of 14. Wow. So the
Oh.
cow, sheep, goat, pig, horse, all of them?
All Eurasian and the Americas. They had exactly one.
The llama.
The llama and alpaca. And they were only found in the Andes. They can't pull a plow effectively, and you certainly can't ride them into battle.
So think about that. No native cavalry in the Americas. No draft animals for large-scale farming.
Yeah.
And no crowd diseases from living with livestock. It's just an
Yeah.
impossible deficit.
And it wasn't for lack of trying in other places. I mean, look at Africa. It had 51 wild mammal species that were, on paper, suitable candidates.
51 potential candidates. And how many were successfully domesticated?
0.
How is that possible? You've got zebras, wildebeest, all these huge herds. Why not them? Why couldn't they domesticate a zebra?
It comes down to behavior, temperament. Zebras, for example, are just legendarily nasty. They have a terrible bite, a really strong panic response, and they're almost impossible to breed in captivity.
So it wasn't about size or strength. It was pure behavioral luck. Eurasia just happened to have the animals with the right disposition.
It was geographic luck, plain and simple. Not just having the animals, but having animals that were behaviorally compatible with domestication.
Okay, so food production explains the material advantage. But how does that initial lead get so big, so dominant across the globe? This is where geography starts to play a different role, right?
Exactly. It stops being about just the starting materials and starts being about the speed of diffusion, the spread of ideas and technologies.
And this is the continental axis argument. Eurasia is primarily oriented east-west.
And why is an east-west axis so good?
Because if you travel east or west, you stay at roughly the same latitude.
Right. Same latitude means similar climate, similar day length, similar seasons.
So a crop like wheat, domesticated in the Fertile Crescent, could spread all the way to Spain or China without much trouble. The plant's internal clock, its whole genetic makeup, still worked.
Precisely. That allows for this incredibly rapid, almost effortless diffusion of crops, animals, and the technologies that go with them right across the continent.
Now you contrast that with the Americas or Africa. Their main axis is north-south.
A north-south axis is a huge barrier. If you try to move a crop just a few hundred miles north or south, you can cross into a totally different climate zone.
And you hit that hot tropical bottleneck in Central America.
Right, so that temperate zone wheat from North America just fails completely near the equator. The same for animals adapted to seasons. The whole package just stops dead.
It's like Eurasia got to build this huge, interconnected superhighway for innovation, while the Americas had a bunch of disconnected local roads with giant roadblocks between them.
That is a perfect analogy. And that geographic difference also plays out politically, which brings us to the final, ultimate factor, fragmentation versus unity.
This one is so counterintuitive. We think of unity as a strength. But in this story, Europe's long-term disunity was its secret weapon.
It was. If you look at China, it's defined by chronic unity. It's got a relatively smooth coastline, a couple of huge navigable river systems that connect everything. It was unified way back in 221 BC.
And that unity created a single point of failure.
A single point of failure, one emperor, one bad decision, and you could halt innovation across an entire subcontinent.
And we know this happened. The famous example of the Ming Dynasty in the 1400s, right?
Yeah.
They had these massive treasure fleets, the biggest ships in the world. They could have sailed to Europe.
They could have colonized the world, but the emperor decided to halt exploration and dismantle the entire fleet. And just like that, it was over.
Now compare that to Europe.
Europe is a geographic mess. It's a jagged puzzle of peninsulas, islands, mountain ranges. These barriers were never enough to stop technology from spreading guns, printing, ideas moved freely.
But they were enough to prevent anyone from ever unifying the whole continent politically.
Which created a situation of chronic, relentless competition, hundreds of competing little states.
An arms race.
A perpetual arms race. So if one ruler in, say, Portugal decides that Columbus's voyage is a dumb idea,
well, Columbus can just walk across the border and pitch it to the rulers of Spain, who are terrified of falling behind Portugal.
Exactly. That constant competition meant that innovation was always rewarded somewhere. It created the very environment that produced the ships, the cannons, and the financial systems that would go on to conquer the world.
So we've come full circle. We've gone from Pizarro's sword at Cajamarca all the way back 13,000 years, to the random luck of which continents had the right kinds of wild plants and animals.
And that head start in food production led to everything else. Dense populations, specialists, germs, technology. Then the continental axis determined how fast all that stuff could spread. And finally, political fragmentation created a competitive pressure cooker.
It was all in the end about the accumulation of cargo, and that was determined by geographic luck.
It's the ultimate explanation for those divergent paths. It wasn't about the people, it was about the environmental stage on which they were playing.
And what's really staggering, what makes this more than just ancient history, is that these patterns still hold. The same geographic factors that predicted who got agriculture first, things like being in a temperate zone, having access to a coast, they are still incredibly strong predictors of national wealth today.
Absolutely. I mean, you can just compare a country like the Netherlands, coastal, temperate, a 7,500-year history of intensive farming and state-level societies, with a country like, say, Zambia,
which is landlocked, tropical, and has a much shorter history of agriculture, plus all the geographic barriers to trade, and a huge tropical disease burden.
The starting lines were set millennia ago, and the race is still being shaped by that initial geography.
So here's the final thought we want to leave you with. We often think of history as this grand, unpredictable drama, driven by great leaders or powerful ideas. But when you peel back the layers of that onion, you find that the broad strokes of history, the fates of entire societies, might have been surprisingly predictable. That they were set not by philosophy or politics, but by something as simple as which wild grass grew on which hill, and whether the local sheep were friendly enough to be tamed.